I'm a bachelor living off the land in the countryside. Recently, however, something exciting has happened. I've become good friends with Grandma Emily. She comes over whenever I call. Some might wonder how that's possible, but we get along quite well. I was raised by my maternal grandparents from a young age. My parents worked in a small city nearby. My grandparents owned a manufacturing plant at the time, and my parents were busy working near that plant. Dad, who grew up in the countryside, didn't want to inherit the farming life and moved to the city to work at my grandfather's plant. My grandfather, seeing the honest and solid character of my dad, introduced him to my mom. My parents, in a rush for reasons I never understood, got married within 100 days of meeting and had me the following year. My grandfather intended to pass the factory on to my dad. Dad worked diligently in accordance with my grandfather's wishes, expanding the business. After the employees left, he would stay late every night to tidy up the factory and check the machines before coming home. However, a close acquaintance defrauded him, leading to the factory's collapse overnight. This shock caused my grandparents to pass away one after the other. My mom, unable to live with my dad anymore, asked for a divorce and left, and I ended up living with my maternal grandmother. Dad went to the city alone to find other work. If someone asks why a young guy like me doesn't move to the city and instead sticks to farming in some rural backwater, the answer is simple. The woman called my mother seems to live in the embrace of another man under some other sky. I've long forgotten the mother who never once looked back at me. Thanks to my loving grandmother, I was able to smoothly complete my education from elementary school through high school and even graduated from college. I'm grateful to my elderly grandmother for raising me and enabling my studies. However, as she grows older, I couldn't bear to leave her alone in the countryside, nor did I have anything particular to do elsewhere. So I ended up farming my dad's fields, and by now, I've reached my mid-40s. Farming is all I know, so I plan to live here, working in the greenhouses. Thanks to diligently working with the healthy body inherited from my parents, I've managed to acquire a sedan and a truck, and despite being a debt-free farmer, women don't seem to give me a second glance. I've tried meeting women, wanting to marry like others. But after a few dates, once I mention farming, the contact usually ends. Despite having plenty of farm equipment and quite a decent income from my hard work, I have no regrets about the women who ran away without giving it a chance. In our village, I'm the youngest by far, with only one lady in her early 60s above me, and most others are in their 70s to late 80s. There are only 2 couples living with their husbands, with the majority being grandmothers living alone after their husbands have passed away. Grandma Emily, whom I've been spending a lot of time with lately, is one of them. I grew up in a small town, but managed to graduate from an engineering college. During my college years, I acquired certifications that would be beneficial for employment, and I honed my skills in soldering, machinery, and electrical work. This made me quite adept at fixing the electrical wiring and various machines needed for farm work. In our community, where many elderly ladies live alone, often without their husbands, they would come running to our house at the slightest sign of trouble, be it electrical outages or plumbing issues. I've always lent a helping hand without showing any signs of annoyance. Of course, I couldn't fix everything. Some of the seniors preferred to wait for their children to handle it, not wanting to rely on outsiders. while others, not wanting to bother their children, would naturally turn to me for help. Being the only young man living alone in our neighborhood, I was often treated kindly since it was almost certain they would need my assistance someday. In fact, I've helped out with so many minor tasks and repair that there's hardly a house I haven't visited. The generosity of our rural community truly shone in those moments. Even though these tasks were easy for me, they were often challenging and complicated for the elderly. They were relieved and grateful when I managed to solve their problems. Some would insist on me staying for a meal as a way of saying thank you, offering simple dishes or hastily packing food for me to take home if I was in a hurry. I worked on the farms, playing a role much like an eldest son to them. My own grandmother passed away naturally at well over 90. During her funeral at the local hospital's funeral home, Soon-hee, a lady in her mid-60s from next door, went out of her way to help out. My grandmother had only my father as her child, who arrived late due to delayed contact, and with most relatives already passed away, the funeral was quite modest. Soon-hee, whose daughter-in-law had left, and who had no one else to help, took charge of the kitchen like she was family. A lady from the funeral service company was also called in, but Soon-hee led the way in hosting the guests. My connection with Soon-hee began last year. She was very close to my grandmother, almost like a mother and daughter since they lived next door and knew everything about each other. With my grandmother's advanced age making it difficult for her to help with my studies, Soon-hee occasionally helped me with my homework and even attended school meetings on behalf of my sick grandmother. Soon-hee had no children of her own. Her husband passed away from lung cancer 10 years ago. She scaled back on farming, maintaining a small vegetable garden instead. There was a time she had to be hospitalized during the busy farming season, and I hired a caregiver and visited her daily. In the midst of a hectic work schedule, where I barely had time to eat properly, Emily came to my rescue, bringing over 3 of my favorite dishes. During one of my busiest periods, she even brought me some alcohol, suggesting I take a moment to relax. I took a breather and chatted with Emily. We shared a moment of vulnerability, discussing how hard it was to think about her not being around much longer. Emily appreciated the help I provided during her husband's illness, allowing her to comfortably navigate hospital visits. She believed in the beauty of mutual support, unlike some of the blunt-speaking elderly women in the countryside who would tactlessly bring up my single status, implying loneliness was an obvious outcome. Emily was different. She chose her words carefully, ensuring our conversations remained private. Our shared drinks marked a memorable day. Emily expressed her loneliness and fear of dying unnoticed due to her age. As I looked at her, I remembered my refuge in her home as a child. After being scolded by my stern grandmother, Emily was always there to comfort me, assuring me of her trust and support. Catching a glimpse of loneliness in her eyes, I hugged her, a gesture she shyly appreciated. This led to more frequent calls to check in on her, which seemed to annoy her slightly. Whenever I mentioned going on blind dates, a reaction I found endearing. Emily always brought food when she visited, making it feel like we were a newlywed couple playing house. One day, Emily declared her door would always be open for me. Lately, she's been helping out at our farm, waiting for others to dine before she makes her move. She shyly offered me a hair essence from the salon, claiming it worked wonders. We enjoyed beautiful sunsets together at the farm, Even after a year since her passing, I've maintained a good relationship with Emily, keeping it discreet from the other elderly ladies. We celebrated our hard work at the farm by treating ourselves to lavish meals and bakery cafe visits with Emily, always modestly questioning if such luxuries were permissible. To me, Emily was always the most beautiful bride